Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, invited guests, city staff, and all in attendance today. I want to welcome you to our public works session. Also want to acknowledge my colleagues on council and our city manager, Mr. Stephen Carter, our city attorney, Mr. LaVonda Graham-Williams. And with that, I will ask our Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bryant.
Present.
Mr. Dotson.
Here.
Mr. Hugel.
Present.
Mr. Moody.
Here.
Ms. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Tillett.
Here.
Mayor Glover.
Here. And Mr. Carter, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council, ladies and gentlemen in the audience. Welcome to our work session. We have 3 presentations for you this evening, plus we have an introduction of our mission and vision statement. The first presentation this evening will be from our planning department, Ms. Dr. Rhonda Russell. She will introduce the team that's going to make that presentation on the flood resiliency study. Dr. Russell.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening, Dr.
Good
Russell.
evening.
This is I like our meetings in this room. I'm very comfortable in this room. Our planning commission meets here all the time. I'd like to introduce you to our consultant partners who have supported the OLDCC resiliency grant effort. And that resource has allowed us to study major thoroughfares that support the shipyard, the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, and the many employees that traverse our roadways to and from the shipyard for employment. We have 3 team members here. We've worked primarily with the project manager, Mrs. Kirsten Tinch, and our presentation will be done this evening by Mr. Hines and Mr. Corlett, who have also supported the public presentations and our public engagement efforts for the OLDCC grant. Staff is available to answer any questions that you might have. I'd like to advise the council and the manager that the grant in terms of performance does end at the end of the month. So all of our grant deliverables are required at that point in time, and we'll have about 90 days after that period to close out the grant as far as expenses are concerned. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Thank you very much for having us today to talk about our OLDCC Flood Resilience Study Project. Do I use this to progress the slides?
You can just click it.
Yes, that's
Should.
okay. But it gets it.
Okay.
So
We're back in this room, y'all.
While she's doing that, what does OLDCC stand for? It's the Office of Local Defense and Community Cooperation Grant. We got it. So what do I have there? So.
Oh, no.
There we go.
Respect.
All right, I'll leave the instruction page off. So we've got a team of coastal engineers, civil engineers, water resources engineers, and transportation engineers, environmental scientists, and planners. Because it really does take a diverse cross-section of disciplines to put together a study like this, or put together solutions for a study like this. The goal is to come up with 30% design solutions to ultimately be funded for final design, environmental permitting, and construction. As Dr. Rhonda said, March 31st is the end of the current grant schedule, so we are a little bit up against the end of the process, which we started back in 2023. We've got about 50 different solutions in here that we'll get to, and the total cost of all those solutions coupled together is about $750 million, plus or minus. So it is a lot of dollars we're talking about here. So this is a slide addressing the JLU study. This is where we were. So back in 2021, the Chesapeake and Portsmouth JLU study was completed and set a course to further study 5 major corridors in Portsmouth here. So Effingham Street, George Washington Highway, Portsmouth Boulevard, Frederick Boulevard, and Victory. And looking at multiple different design storms, 10-year design storms, 100-year design storms, multiple different sea level rise, tailwater conditions or tidal conditions, 1.5 foot and 3 foot, increase in sea level rise and tidal outfall elevations. And basically, this study prioritized the 5 corridors for us, and we're taking them and taking a little bit deeper dive into them with this OODCC study.
Click. There's something. There you go. How about I click for you?
Thank you very much.
We'll do that.
So again, this just kind of summarizing. We went from JLUS, which this bit is about reaching critical infrastructure during emergency situations, during flood events, hurricanes and things of that nature. Being able to get to mission critical facilities for the Department of Defense is where this is founded from. During this phase of the study, we did meet with different stakeholders within the city and the Navy, and trying to come up with solutions that meet more needs than just that one. Things that would help emergency services professionals within the city of Portsmouth reach people as well, and also getting people that work at these facilities from the neighborhoods that they live in around them to their place of work. And we're leaving this study off with a lot of solutions and a call for a lot of money to develop the solutions.
Thanks, JD. So as JD mentioned, this study that we've been supporting for the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation is taking the joint land use study and trying to bring those recommended actions into something that can be implemented, and providing that through the steps that we have up here on the slides. And so on the left, we're stepping from assessing the JLUS results, evaluating the existing conveyance system, the previous studies that have been done. Then we stepped into engagement with the community as well as key stakeholders. And so we'll elaborate on that. But then taking both the combined results from the meetings as well as what JLUS recommended to come up with a suite of alternative solutions for each one of the targeted and recommended corridors that came out of the JLUS study. And then building off of those conceptual solutions that we developed, we then tested specifically the solutions along the Effingham corridor, because that was highlighted as the most critical corridor from the JLUS study and from community engagement. And so really evaluating the alternatives that we developed in those preliminary concepts to come up with a more robust conceptual solution for that corridor. Next slide, please. And so just to provide a bit of background on the community engagement aspect of this study, we carried out a series of stakeholder meetings, as I mentioned, as well as public engagement meetings. The targeted stakeholder meetings encompassed meeting with 5 external agencies to the city, so that's addressing the Navy, as well as VDOT and several other agencies, as well as meeting with 6 city departments and making sure that the concerns within the external agencies within the city were being heard and incorporated into the development of these solutions. We also had public meetings, and we had public meetings with robust turnout, and we also had this web-based survey that was out last year. We had another public feedback survey that was recently open, and that was shared throughout the city, both on the city's website as well as through the civic leagues and through the naval avenues there. And really, the results that came out of this engagement confirmed what the JLUS study had recommended initially, and that the JLUS study was building off of concerns from the Navy, as well as Portsmouth and Chesapeake, as well as HRPDC. And so it was just stepping through to confirm that we're still addressing the right corridors for the region. Next slide, please. And so what we're showing here, these are results from the JLUS study, but we're going to step through after this slide to show you the conceptual solutions. And so we wanted to show some context and get everybody on the same page. And so we're showing the 5 corridors that were picked out as the top 5 priorities from the JLUS study. These were recommended for actions for further study to try to develop, eventually to get to solutions for flooding hazards. What you're seeing here are flood depths for combined flooding. So that's flooding from a 10-year rainfall event with 3 feet of sea level rise, with existing infrastructure as it is on the ground. And so the different colors that show up on the screen are depths ranging from 3 inches for yellow to over 18 inches, 1.5 feet for purple. And so we've highlighted the areas in the vicinity of those 5 priority corridors, stepping from Effingham, Victory, Frederick, Portsmouth, and George Washington Highway in there as well. So really trying to weave together, we know what the potential is for flooding concerns and what the existing flooding concerns are, and trying to use that to build into a suite of solutions to really address this so that we can provide those access along those critical corridors. Next slide, please.
Progress it one more. So we kind of categorized a lot of the solutions with the challenge and paired that up visually with the solution, and we'll get into that. But just looking at the different challenges around the city, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the largest challenge is low-lying elevation. However we're situated topographically, there are points along Effingham and these other corridors that are at elevation 2.3, and that's about a foot above a normal high tide elevation. That's all the freeboard that we have. That's a pretty tough problem to solve. You have storm surge coming in. You have groundwater filling most of the storm system pipes before a rainfall event ever comes in, so that we call that stealing potential storage from the system. When it's filling up with groundwater, there's no room for rainwater to get through it and get out to the tidal outfalls. We've got historic register places along these alignments that we need to try to avoid and maintain and protect with our resilient solutions. We've got some Superfund sites, contaminated soils, which is pretty typical of an urbanized area with a military influence over time. That's another constraint that we're dealing with. And then combined flood events is the big takeaway. So when we have a lot of flooding problems in Hampton Roads all around, right? But it really exacerbates itself when there's a rainfall event paired with a high tide occurs. Like when those two things happen at the same time, the water at the outfall is too high for the rainwater to escape the city system and get back out to the tidal outfall where it belongs. So our solutions are paired to these problems, and we've got, elevating roads is really the only, is the best solution that we can put forward. If it's at elevation 2.5, we're going to try to pick all the roads up to roughly elevation 6. And that gets you above a 10-year storm with a 3-foot sea level rise factor associated with it. So that's roughly the elevation of the tidal outfall gets to roughly elevation 6 when a 10-year storm occurs and 3 foot of sea level rise on the current high tide condition. That's what you got. So our goal is to get the roads up to elevation 6 or higher. When you do that, you displace flood storage volume. So then you can't just build the road up and then the transportation corridor is there and you're pushing that water onto residences or commercial properties. Sure. So you have to upgrade the conveyance systems and put a tide gate at the outfall to keep the storm surge from coming back up into the city system beneath the streets, and a pump station to help excavate a lot of that water in front of the storm. So next slide. So again, these are the two graphics. You can see the challenges on this side. You can see there's a lot of areas of purple indicated. That's 18 inches of flood depth during a 10-year design event with a 3-foot sea level rise factor on it. So that's 18 inches of ponding shown per watershed-wide modeling that's been done historically. And you can sort of see on this slide, that you can see it. These are color-coded, and Bryce will get into what each of these mean. But you can see that the density of the color is the density of the solutions paired with the density of the problem areas side by side. So you can kind of see we're trying to apply more solutions where the problem is more severe. Next slide. So we broke the project down into kind of manageable chunks based on drainage areas and how water is moving below and above ground. So Effingham Street has 3 different study areas that are all costed separately. Close to up at the north end, close to the Naval Hospital, Old Town in the middle, and at the south end of the study area, Portsmouth Boulevard, near the shipyard. George Washington Highway was broken into Frederick Boulevard and Hanbury Ave as sort of 2 different distinct solution areas. And Frederick Boulevard we broke down into 4 different solution areas. Victory, just where it crosses I-264 was the main problem area on Victory, but obviously that prevents access to the interstate, which is also a goal of this, is to be able to move people from the downtown area to higher ground more efficiently. That's another goal of the study. Next slide.
And so I'll step through the solutions that we have for Effingham, and then JD will address Portsmouth Boulevard. And so really, tonight we're presenting, these are solutions that we have for these corridors. We also have solutions that JD just showed for the other corridors as well. So it's just to give a flavor of what the potential solutions look like when you're raising roads, dealing with either combined flooding down right at the riverfront versus flooding upstream where you're dealing with mostly pluvial rainfall events, flooding the surface and trying to get that either store locally or get it out efficiently and effectively. So here what we're seeing, starting up at the north end of the Naval Hospital, what you're seeing on the left, again, are the same maps that we've been showing, where purple is 18 inches of flood depth for 3 feet of sea level rise and a 10-year rainfall event. You can see Effingham Street there is flooded. It goes into the park and down to the river. Yellow, again, is 3 inches of flooding locally. So you can get a sense of what that range is. And then you can see on the right the potential solutions that we're trying to layer together to create something that allows for effective passage on Effingham during an event like this. And so that means raising the road, like JD was saying. So we're getting here up to 6 feet from 2.5, but once you raise the road, in order to allow the water that's upstream to continue to get out and not have any repercussions around it, that means you have to upgrade the surrounding conveyance system. And so that's the roughly 2,000 linear feet of upsizing those pipes. But once you're upsizing the pipes, you want to make sure that the tide's not flowing in with 3 feet of sea level rise. And so adding tide gates at the downstream end on the river to make sure that it's not backing up into the system and reducing your capacity and your ability to get the rainwater out. And so in conjunction with that, typically we'd have a pump station next to a stormwater basin or some other local storage to be able to have some capacity. So if you have more rainfall than you expect, you have a place for that to pool, and then you can get it out effectively. In this case, like JD was mentioning, the constraints. So we have a Superfund site here on the park, so we're not able to put in that stormwater detention basin. But instead we can have the pump, we can pump the groundwater that's in the stormwater conveyance system out preemptively, and then you're able to continue to pump that system dry so that during these 10-year and 3-foot sea level rise events, you're able to get the water out and have that safe passage to the hospital. Next slide, please. As we move down, here we're looking at Old Town. Again, it's the same panels. It'll be the same on the next slide and the one after that. Purple is 18 inches of sea level of flooding. Yellow is 3 inches of flooding. So you can see where it's flooding the most. Really, we're trying to address flooding on Effingham to provide that safe passage up to the hospital and down to the shipyard. And so we're raising the road again to get up to above that water level elevation. So we're getting up to 6 feet. That means, just like we saw next to the hospital, increasing the sizing of the piping. So in this case, it's roughly 8,000 linear feet of pipes to try and get that water out. And adding in a tide gate at the downstream end so that you're not having the tide flow back upstream into the conveyance system. And just like next to the hospital, putting in a pump station to make sure that we're able to draw that down preemptively so that you're not dealing with a situation of combined flooding within the conveyance system due to the groundwater that's just taking up capacity, and you could preemptively get it out before the storm would pass. Next slide, please. And so as we move down to the south, here we're calling it the south area, the south end of Effingham. Here we're farther away from the river, so we're not dealing with the combined flooding as much. We're still talking about tide gates because there are regions to the east where we can add those, and that helps out the situation in this area. We are raising the road to get up to 6 feet, get up in this case to 6.5 from the existing 4. But here, since we're in the upland area, we're dealing with rainfall. We're trying to capture as much as we can so that it's not all rushing downstream to impact the areas that are down by the river. And so in this case, that looks like adding stormwater ponds, having that storage in existing areas where we can put those basins, upgrading the piping, just like we talked before. Again, you might be able to see, might be a little hard to see, this hatching over here is a Superfund site, and so trying to make sure that we're putting our detention basins outside of that where we can and dealing with the constraints of just a historical urban area that many places have to deal with these. And so it's all of those solutions working together as a suite, a layered solution to be able to handle a 10-year event with 3 feet of sea level rise.
Next slide, please. So moving closer to the shipyard here, this is a real problem area in a nexus of multiple corridors. We did have a stakeholder meeting with the shipyard folks specifically, and they've more recently voiced a little bit of concerns about our proposed solution here. But it's what we've got is a placeholder for permeable pavers and a large expanse of surface parking. What we talked to them about potentially was doing a parking deck and getting some elevated parking to get the people that are parking there to work out of the flood, as well as like a mutually beneficial solution, and then possibly doing a regional stormwater pond. But we really didn't want to. We kind of wanted to stay in our lane, so to speak, or not get too creative with the solution, but just to show that a large expanse of surface parking like that is a good candidate for a stormwater B&P retrofit or solution, because it's just, is it the best use of space from an urban planning perspective as well too, right? So it seemed like a good solution to us, and coupled that with conveyance system upgrades and elevating the roadways in this area as well. So somewhat more of the same, except for the permeable paver parking areas for the shipyard. So next slide. Summarizing the costs per corridor, it may be a little hard for you guys to see over on the left, but we've got the cost broken down by study area, and then we just summarized them over there on the right in the larger font, larger text to see $400 million worth of improvements in Effingham, $18 million on George Washington Highway, $27 million for Victory Boulevard, another $254 million at Portsmouth Boulevard, and that's at the shipyard nexus of corridors, and then $67 million for Frederick. Next slide. So this slide was a little bit, we had submitted this a couple weeks ago. We have prioritized solutions. We created our own prioritization scale in this study, in the final report, that builds upon the JLUIS study findings and actually reconfirms through our public meetings and stakeholder meetings and all the analyses that we've done. The corridors in order from the JLUIS study are the same prioritization order that we had. We found the same as the JLUIS study found, I guess, so confirming that.
And we did factor in cost as part of that evaluation of priorities as well, to try to make sure that the cost that we're providing here lines up with the level of solutions that are needed for each corridor.
Which was not part of, the cost was not a factor of the JLUIS study, just to be clear there. So that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Councilman Hugel, you have the floor, sir.
So I appreciate the presentation and the opportunity to come meet with you guys when you had all of the charts up. So do you have a sense of how much federal grant money is available to do stuff like this? I mean, is it B billions, T trillions, M millions?
That's a trickier question today than it was several weeks ago or months ago, but so the OLDCC has an implementation grant program also, I would say, so that these things are set up to progress from one stage to another. So I think you're in sort of the candidate queue for an implementation grant from OLDCC. There are a lot of other grant sources out there. I would say we're trying to monitor that closely, and it is a changing landscape on us right this minute. But I don't see how something like this could be ignored long term. Personally, I mean, I think that flood resiliency is going to continue to be front of mind, especially unfortunately when we have natural disasters coming through pretty regularly these days. I asked Western North Carolina about it, right? So that's a little bit of a dodgy answer, but sorry.
So for the grant funding that you all are aware of, what typically does the local community have to provide in way of a match? Is it 50-50 or 20-80 or?
I think it's 2080.
Most of the grant applications.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is because Norfolk's got this multi-billion-dollar Great Wall of Norfolk that they're planning on building, and I know they've gone to the state looking for help with the match, because the match piece that's pushed back to the local community, I don't know how they're ever going to be able to afford to build the wall if they got to come up with that much money. And so, I mean, these are big numbers for us, and finding even 20%, if that's our bill. But as you said, I mean, sooner or later, we got to do something. And so even if we start chipping away at it, we got to understand how much we need to set aside in CIP to be able to do this.
So there could be creative funding avenues to public-private partnerships that tackle some of these flood resiliency measures and possibly have a benefit of a development in this area. This is adjacent, this is waterfront adjacent improvements. These are waterfront adjacent improvements. So I think that with some creativity, maybe some dollars could be woven together to make some of this stuff happen more effectively for you. But
And are these projects eligible for DSIP funds?
yes.
Yes. Okay. And do you know if there's anything in our CIP plan already that overlaps with these things? I mean, I know there's a pump station in the CIP for Old Town, but I'm not sure if there's anything else already in CIP that helps us here.
Really addresses this. This is the result of a new study that just been completed. So this hasn't factored into the things that you studied.
Yeah. Okay.
Vice Mayor Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I think those of us from here, nothing was surprising in the areas that flood. We experience them all the time during storms. What is shocking is the price tag. But my question is, can this be, does it have to be turnkey, or can it be done in stages? Because it seems like obviously raising the elevation of the roads impacts property, residents. So how would you go about this if you say, would you do the piping, would you do the road elevation? What could it be done in stages?
Short answer, yes. You can't raise the road without doing the other things first. So you would have to raise the road last in the series, but you would upgrade the conveyance system and put a tide gate. Could be a phase 1. Then add a stormwater pump station, could be a phase 2, then elevate the road would be phase 3, sort of that kind of sequence for each of the individual areas, right?
Thanks.
Or you could
detention basin and
yeah, it's all feasible. You just have, the one thing you can't do first is elevate the road.
Right.
So.
Thanks.
Councilwoman.
To follow up on that, describe to us what raising the road looks like. How do you raise a road to be 6 feet in a neighborhood? What does that look like?
Especially 3.5 feet.
Right.
So
Yeah.
in a lot of these instances, the road is sort of the belly of the whole, the road is acting as the detention basin today.
Right.
In a lot of these areas, that's kind of what you want to kind of try to visualize. So the neighborhoods and the commercial properties are at a higher elevation, not in every situation, but in most of these situations, I would say we have that sort of ability. Or it could look like, it could be a wall at the edge of the right-of-way or something similar to hold the edge. And so that's built into the cost, and that's why you might be seeing these numbers and thinking like that kind of stuff is thought through and built into the projected cost of these solutions where needed.
I'm trying to picture this in the area around Effingham near the Naval Hospital, where that neighborhood almost entirely, that Swimming Point neighborhood is the one that's identified as being under the water. And it's just kind of baffling to imagine the road being elevated there in that historic neighborhood and certainly in other neighborhoods across the city. So that's probably me just having to wrap my head around that. But on top of that, have projects like this been done in other communities, and how disruptive is it? What's the timeline
So
put giant pipes under the under the city? And
yeah,
this feels like an outstanding project, like a monumental project that would be incredibly disruptive. I guess I'm just trying to capture the scope of the construction involved.
yeah, it absolutely will be a disruptor for the neighborhoods to get this done.
Right.
And
It's going to be disrupted for a while.
Like Court Street times.
Yeah.
So dealing with flooding is hard. Dealing with construction to alleviate flooding is hard. Pick your hard. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Okay, one other question as I try and grapple all of this. The pooling, the water ponds that you were describing, how does that impact mosquitoes and that sort of thing?
So there's treatments for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so believe it or not, there's not a lot of wet pond or wet basin solutions in there. There's the 3 or 4 in the interchange loops that you saw. But there's not a lot of that, although I think it's a really great solution. It's one of the cheaper solutions, and it's one of the more of the go-tos from the engineering toolbox is to do a wet pond. If you look around, there's usually a lot of them around. There's treatments you can do to keep the mosquito habitat down, and we work with a lot of landscape architects. If you put the correct plants in, there are mosquito repelling plants. They're that we can weave into the landscape around these ponds to help. The fountain or aerators that disturb the water surface. They help with algal blooms, but they also help to limit the amount of mosquito.
I think that would be an important consideration. I know it might seem small
Yeah.
compared to the rest of this, but
No, those things matter. We understand. Yeah.
Councilwoman Thomas, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you. So for the external agencies, you mentioned the Navy, I think was the Coast Guard involved at all? Or not, because it's not DOD, because it's DHS?
I don't think we had a meeting with the Coast Guard off the top of my head. I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think
Is it because it's DOD related?
No,
Okay.
because our facilities were not located on the 5 corridors.
Okay, so we took the 5 quarters from the initial study
From
and
the
just kind of
GMS,
carried
yes,
it over and didn't identify the, okay. All right.
VDOT, Norfolk Naval Shipyard, the Navy proper, the VA, and HRPDC.
And I'm just asking that because, considerations for other areas in our city, but I guess that initial study, which I'm not familiar with, already identified, looked at the entire city? Is that how the initial study worked? It looked across the city and then prioritized these corridors that you mentioned here?
Correct.
Okay.
It
Which
was,
is most of our downtown, like our downtown area, okay.
the original study was looking at citywide, focusing on DOD with Chesapeake and Portsmouth. And so specifically looking at transportation corridors, what benefits the local community as well as the DOD community.
Okay.
So that's what highlighted the 5 corridors, and those came out as the top 5 actions that they recommended. And then we are bringing those forward to get those to acceptable concept plans.
Okay, and then the last, on the probable construction cost slide, these are in priority order, so Effingham Street is what you're saying is the #1 priority for the $400 million,
For all 3 study areas.
for all 3 study areas, okay. And is that, okay, so then the prioritize is south first, is that correct? The South Effingham is prioritized, like within that first?
Actually, I believe
They were prioritized by corridor. So when we received public feedback, it was largely focused on individual corridors and
Okay.
trying to emphasize those. I think you could step through the different areas in terms of phased implementation or phased construction to address downstream to put in tide gates or upstream to put in the detention ponds so that you can capture kind of the forces at both ends and work in with improving the surveillance system in between and then raise the roads. So
So when we took all the public surveys and engaged the public, we hadn't broken it out into the subset study areas at that point in time. We did that once we got into doing modeling and analysis of the areas, and we weren't able, because everything's kind of connected in some way. So how do we split it up into manageable parts? That came from more of the analysis and evaluation stage after we had met with the stakeholders the first time. A lot of the notes were just corridor specific, not study area specific.
And then one last question. The timeline, because this was based on a 10-year flooding, 10-year rain, how do you say that, 10-year flooding event?
10-year storm event.
Okay, 10-year storm event. So like in timeline, how long do we have? How long do we have, like considering like historical data to implement something like?
So it's consistent with the joint land use study, which was
Okay.
2065 to 2070.
Okay, thank
So
you.
it does depend on looking at sea level rise curves and which curve you want to go through, but it's got rainfall projections in there, but that's the time frame that they were looking at to get to for that study.
Okay, and thank you.
Councilman Dodson.
Thank you. So if I understand the numbers correctly, you're talking about raising some roads 3.5 feet? Was that the maximum
Roughly, yeah.
in there too? And the only modes of transportation that you're considering are roadways. You're not considering any other alternative modes of transportation, is that correct?
This wasn't necessarily a traffic study per se, so the corridors will have sidewalks or pedestrian walks along either side of them when we elevate them, so there will be pedestrian connectivity at that.
No, but the
elevated
purpose
descent.
was like for transporting materials, not just people. It's materials and people was your transportation modes you're studying?
We weren't really studying different transportation modes with this. We were studying these specific corridors were sort of handed to us from the JLU study.
Okay, so you were
take a deeper dive with them.
forced into these corridors.
Yeah, we were not able to look outside of these areas based on the grant terms and
Understood.
conditions.
So if there were a light rail incorporated into a system like this, you would have or would not have considered that as part of the plan?
We couldn't step out into that, like similar to proposing a parking deck or something in Norfolk Naval Ship. Like we had to kind of stay within a lane with this.
And the parking too, right?
If there were a study, or if there were a study for light rail, we could have taken that into consideration with this study, but we have not, and we weren't tasked with looking at that specifically
Thank you.
with this. Yeah.
Vice Mayor Moody. Sorry, you have-
There's some overpasses on those corridors. Does that price cost take that into consideration?
Yes, so those are areas prone to flooding, and that's shown on the map. So most of those are addressed with stormwater pump station. So and that won't eliminate. Setting expectations with these types of things is probably the trickiest part with the public and people the owners that pay for these types of studies. We're not going to eliminate every flood, every rain event. There's just no way possible to do that when the topography is so low. But where you have an underpass, the thought would be before a storm approaches, the pump station at the low tide in front of the stormer's arrival will push all the stormwater out of the pipes below grade and create more capacity for the rain event on the upland side. So those underpasses would have some storage in the pipes below them that they wouldn't normally have with the addition of a pump station.
Well, what I was talking about is the truck traffic and the clearance, because that'll drastically reduce the clearance.
Yeah, we're not elevating roads below an underpass. Yeah, there's a vertical height restriction there. We're not infringing on that with
So that wouldn't be infringed
We're
upon?
not proposing to elevate the underpasses. No, we can't. Not without, we could, but not without elevating the other.
So the roads in those areas wouldn't be raised?
We're correct.
Okay. How would that work?
Is that going to flood?
That area as an underpass.
Sorry, as a transportation
Go
part,
ahead.
I'll answer that part. So
Can you come over
the
here?
roads, sorry. Apologize for talking from the background.
One of the worst flooding areas is Frederick Boulevard underpass.
Yes, and the elevations where we are raising the roads is prior to tie into the underpass, but then adding the conveyance system allows us to get the water out from under the underpass without having to raise the road at that particular location.
Okay, so
So addressing it elsewhere,
done via
adding the
pumping.
conveyance addresses that issue.
okay.
Because when you're talking those numbers, when you start having to reconfigure the interchange, that really starts to elevate your costs.
That's why I asked the question. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Yeah, same question for the crossing the railroads too. How's that handled?
Trying to think if we have any, and none of the road crossings are at the railroad crossings. I'm trying to think of any.
There's a couple of railroad crossings in,
There are in the corridors,
But not
but not where the road is being raised. I don't think. You have to go back and look.
yeah, I'd have to look at it. It looks close, but you're right, it may not be.
I think we stopped short of the railroad crossings and the S6.
Go ahead.
One last question. Is there another community near us that this type of project has already been implemented that
Yeah.
is an example for us to?
We have several of these types of projects underway through different grant funding mechanisms. We have one that's been constructed, NC12, down in Duck, and it's not necessarily, it's not the same context as
Right.
as downtown Portsmouth, obviously, but we elevated about, I think, 2,500 linear feet of NC12 in an area that was about the same, elevation 2.5 at the low point, and the rest of that road is at elevation 5. So we elevated 2,500 linear feet from elevation 2.5 up to 5, and did some compensatory storage. We did underground detention adjacent to the road to mitigate for the flood, for the fill, the embankment of the road, taking some flood storage from the neighborhood.
Shoreline protection.
We did shoreline restoration and shoreline protection. We did a layered solution there, and that was a brick funded, a FEMA brick grant, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities grant. So it's being done. There are a lot of these underway. Yeah, I think Hampton Boulevard that connects up ODU to downtown Norfolk to the base. Ultimately, will be a study area. Mungo Ferry Road in Virginia Beach. That's one of our projects. That's a Protect grant. We're elevating that from elevation 2.5 up to elevation as high as elevation 6, I believe. So there's a lot of them around. Hampton is looking at LaSalle,
Yeah.
which has a military component to it as well.
I had one question. I've seen over the years some mock-ups of, in the event of a Category 3 or 4 or 5 storm, the hurricane, probably a good part of Portsmouth would be flooded. Did we factor anything like that into the short term? Is that any consideration? Or it's just, it is what it is. You have a Category 4, 3, 4 storm. The water is just going to be the water, and everybody will probably need to get out of town, right?
Yeah, I think that just needs to be sort of classified as a retreat scenario or stay and bat down the hatches and
Right.
we need to be more resilient. We can't design resilient solutions around that.
Sure.
That would have to be resilient to that, it would be my short answer to it, but
Okay.
yes, sir.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your information. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Manager Carter, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the presentation. Very insightful information. Let us know that we have challenges in our future. Not just challenges physically, but fiscally also. How do we make this work? We've got to figure out a way to protect our future as we build in those things that we're trying to get done today. So we do everything today with our future in mind.
Absolutely.
Public safety. Chief Jenkins is up next. He's going to give us a presentation on before we go to public safety. It's going to kind of mimic some of the things we did at the retreat, but I thought it important that we get this done in a public setting in Portsmouth so people can understand where we are with our public safety. Chief Jenkins.
Evening, Chief.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I guess it is evening now. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to.
You want help? You sure?
Yes, ma'am.
You positive?
Just click them out.
Click. Yeah.
All right. So this is a recap along with some updated information from the City Council retreat that I'll be providing today. So some of this information you will be familiar with. However, there is some additional information that has been added, and then obviously we'll have some time for discussion at the end. So as we discussed at the City Council retreat, this is a cost of crime as it relates to the city of Portsmouth and what it looks like for us. Right now, we're averaging about $867 as it relates to criminal activity within the city. Now, that is about $403 higher than the national average. Now, what that means specifically is that crime costs us in every way from the amount that you spend on public safety, incarceration, your court system, but also when you talk about other things such as property crime and loss and destruction of property, in addition to having to deal with individuals that are repeat offenders. One of the things that you will note as it relates to violent crime, that you have a one chance in 121 of being a victim of violent crime, but your property crime is significantly higher. Now, obviously, you think in terms of stolen trash cans, license plates, things of that nature that unfortunately we have that had a boom in license plates after the inception of the tunnel and having to navigate through that. So just some regional challenges, but specifically that deal with here with us in the city. So some of the strategies that we started to initiate to address some of our things as it relates to crime and also to try to navigate some of our staffing challenges. We wanted to be very direct in what we were doing, focusing specifically on our targets rather than trying to be all over the place dealing with crime that obviously patrolling and the crime prevention part are very important. But it's also important that we are directly target those individuals that we know are out committing the crimes. And so we committed to being very laser focused on doing that and developing some geographic focuses, understanding where our crimes were, but more importantly, who were the individuals that were committing the crimes in that particular area. Obviously, we've been doing community policing for a number of years, and that continues to be one of the cornerstones for us as an organization. We continue to educate our newest police officers in the importance of community policing and building those trusting relationships that we can see that are paying some dividends for us as it relates to participation with our crime initiatives and things of that nature, which folds into our collaborations and partnerships. Obviously, we can talk on Portsmouth United. I know you've all heard quite extensively about that. Going into, just for everybody understanding, Portsmouth United is a city-wide initiative. That means every department in the city that is expected to participate in Portsmouth United, but also our local hospital, our clergies, our nonprofits. Everybody is, again, about building an ecosystem as it relates to public safety. We spend a lot of time talking about our technology integration, things about like ALPRs, automatic license plate readers, our gunshot detection, which we are expanding throughout the city, and utilization of real-time crime center. You have noticed a number of portable trailers that we've allocated across the city, and those things have been working wonders for us. It is amazing that people still will see a camera and sometimes commit a crime right under it. But lucky for us that it allows us to capture it. One of the things I'll highlight now, just because it popped in my mind, we did have our most recent homicide, which was our 4th homicide of the year, that just occurred over the weekend. Unfortunately, a 51-year-old man lost his life. I am happy to say that we were able to make an arrest in that on yesterday. That individual is in custody, charged with first-degree murder and a number of other charges. So again, great work to the detectives, the patrol officers who responded and were able to assist in locking that scene down. And I just wanted to make sure that I gave some public acknowledgement to them for that. Problem-oriented policing, again, a lot of different strategies that you will hear and see, but again, things such as also understanding that there are some things that may not necessarily be best for the police to handle. Something may be better for zoning to handle. Something may be better for code inspections to handle. And so understanding where your problems are and then collaborating with your other departments, maybe ordinances or something that council enacts for us to be able to tackle these issues. Sometimes it's not just us going in with the police department trying to address these things. We've had other localities have had very good success with identifying problems and then attacking it from various approaches. We work quite frequently with the fire marshal's office and the health department, code, zoning, tackling some of our problem establishments, which we yielded some good work with that. Obviously, neighborhood engagement, we do quite a bit of that. Witness protection, that's something that we added as it relates to the Safe Communities grant, which we're now able to offer stabilization to families, gunshot wound victims. We've actually moved a few families around. This is not us sitting outside of the house, as you would think when you talk about federal witness protection, but this is giving out people who are most likely to either retaliate or be victims of additional crimes the opportunity to relocate to a different area. Again, intelligence-driven operation. That's just basically understanding dots on the map, understanding where you need to be, what times you need to be there, and finally, continuous improvement in community input. We've instituted through not only our social media but also our webpage, lots of opportunity for community engagement and feedback. I'll stand here and tell you I don't know all the answers. So if somebody has a great idea, something that we should look at and try, and I'm all ears to be able to look at something that maybe something worked in another community that we should at least take a look at. And I can tell you that we spent a lot of time looking at our partners within the region, but also across the country. The region is fine, but one of the things that I constantly remind everyone is there's not anyone locally that looks like us. And so, unfortunately, we compare ourselves to Norfolk, who is much larger than us, different police department, different staffing. So some of the tactics and things that they're able to do a little bit different than what we are. All right, so predictive policing, again, us basically understanding where our crime is based on not only historical data that we've had. Usually we'll run year to date versus maybe a 3-year and a 5-year, understanding predictively where our crime usually nestles within an area. Generally, you will there are parts of this where you may think, just because it's a particular area, this is where the concentration of crime is. But as you start diving in, peeling into the data, it may be 2 or 3 blocks over. And sometimes it's attached to 1 or 2 houses on that block that really make that whole block a challenge. And so again, understanding what the data is saying to us and how to attack it is been real good for us here lately. Again, we talked about community-oriented policing and its intelligence for building partnerships, but obviously the newest one that we're continuing with is the violence interruption. Violence interruption is relatively a new thing that is across the country. I did have an opportunity to participate in the webinar, and one of the, just this past week, and one of the things that I learned from that webinar is that as a city we are a lot further ahead than some of the bigger cities that are just now implementing this, with putting individuals within areas that we know that are challenging, taking the same concept of an individual who suffers from substance abuse, who sometimes has the best experience with being able to keep others from relapsing or things of that nature. Taking that same concept of an individual who has life experience as it relates to crime in hopes that they'll be able to break cycles, deter fights. We had just last week, we were having a series of fights in London Oaks just last week, and thankfully we were able to get a couple of the violence interrupters out there to actually diffuse that. And so again, that was actually good for letting the neighborhoods be able to handle some of their own issues. And so again, that's still in the infancy for us. There's some training that has to be done, some additional allocation of individuals to that program, but it is starting to pay some dividends for us. All right, so I titled this "Better Days Ahead." So when you look at this, between 2022 and 2023, we've had a 6% reduction in our overall decreases in homicides. That's a positive trend. When you couple that with our experience from last year, where we had a 17% reduction in overall crime, that's all crime, property crimes, and our homicides or violent crime. For the past 3 years, we've had a reduction in crime, and as of right now, year to date, if we were to end, we would be at a 66% reduction in homicides and a 21% reduction in our overall crime. So again, positive numbers as it relates to that. Again, no time for us to celebrate, but we want to make sure that we are being very responsive to what we're seeing as it relates to the numbers. A deeper look, our homicides for last year from 2023 to 2024, we had a 7.69% reduction, down 16% from 2022. Our non-fatal shootings are down from 128 to 89. We experienced an 11% reduction in 2024, which includes all violent crime that's reported UCR of homicides, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Our property crime continues to trend down 17%, and currently our property crime numbers 3,756 for last year, which again definitely trending down for where we were the previous year. Our clearance rate as it relates to arrests that we're able to make for those violent crimes, specifically for homicides, is up to 70%. And you have to understand, again, we've had some localities that have had 100%, and that is outstanding. But when you talk about challenges like we have, when we talk about witness intimidation and the fear of retaliation, to be able to close 70% of your homicides, that means not only are you getting participation from your citizens and people are coming forward, but also detectives are doing some outstanding work. And I can tell you that our technology is really helping us close these a lot faster than we have in the past, because it's given us what we've asked for, investigative leads, to be able to go out and start tracking some of these things down. This is just a comparison chart as it relates to our overall gunshot 3-year comparison of firearm-related crimes. In the green is what you would see as shootings that were solved, as you just talked about, you can see that the number of that number is trending up. You will see in the blue, those are actual total gunshot wounds. You will see that those are trending down. Now, when you think about gunshot wounds, they are just the two things, either bad aim or great medicine. And so, you know, again, we really have to think about how many people in our community are becoming victims or have become victims of violent crime. But again, positive news when you see those numbers, the number of shootings starting to trend down. And obviously the ones in red represent our homicides. Now, recruiting, which continues to be a challenge, but a top priority for us as a city and me as a police chief and the police department. One of the things we've come up with several initiatives to address that. It is part of our long-term strategic plan, 5-year plan. The goal for us this year is to have a reduction by 30%, and that's an additional slide we'll get into. But obviously we're addressing 3 things as it relates to recruitment and retention, and that is competitive salaries, recruitment incentives, and also wellness programs. We have to keep the ones that we have here that are at that age to retire, but also keeping those other ones mentally and physically healthy, being able to do the job. The challenges are a lot different today than they were years ago. Our personnel is asking and requiring a lot more of us across the country as it relates to police departments. Today, years ago, you would go to a call for service and see something traumatic. The best thing you would get is suck it up and go to the next call. Today, we're having to potentially send people to the quiet room, let them have a few minutes of decompression. We have a zero gravity chair. We're looking at something. We're looking at maybe a therapeutic pet. Some good news that we just received today is that our SISM team, which handles our crisis, is just in its final stages of becoming certified through the state. And so we're putting all those things in place to make sure that when we have situations that happen, that we have the personnel on site and the resources to be able to take care of ourselves so they can take care of you. All right, so we've addressed 4 things that were critical to us in not only our proposal to the city manager, but what we were doing within the police department. Competitive salaries, making sure that we were addressing those pay issues and things of that nature. One of the things that I have had to convey to my staff is that, you know, it's hard to fix 30 or 40 years of issues with one fell swoop. 100%. All right, but one thing I will say, and I say thanks to the council, thanks to the manager, those that were in the past, that y'all have been responsive to addressing those issues as it relates to public safety, and we hear that. My staff hears it, but again, it's a continuous investment in personnel. We've looked at shift differentials. Those individuals that work nights obviously earn more working nights. We've instituted that. Performance recognition, as Mr. Carter alluded to with the pay plan, is something that we're looking at not only in the police department and public safety, but citywide. And so I had an opportunity to go over that with my folks on last Thursday and give them a comprehensive review of that plan and how it was intended to work, but then also let them know that there was additional work that still needed to be done on how you start to move individuals through those steps and make sure that they understand that we were looking for their buy-in. What does it look like for a 2-year officer? What should they have? What does a 5-year officer look like? What type of certifications should my admin coordinator have? Because again, we do have professional support staff that assist us. So again, those are all positive steps for us. And then last but not least, career advancement. Really investing in our folks and making sure that that they had the best training, that they're prepared to for succession, to be able to lead the department into the next generation of policing. We're really putting the emphasis today on if you don't have a degree, make sure you get a degree. Looking at all the other opportunities that are out there. I can tell you that was not something that happened earlier in my career. But today I'm asking because I want folks to have the ability, when the opportunity comes, to be able to lead. So some of the initiatives that we've proposed to the manager was increasing the signing bonus for new hires, again, to potentially be paid into 2 parts based on initial hire and then after completion of a year or the police academy. Those are things that we're discussing. Housing allocation for individuals out of state, most first time maybe moving into the state, something that we will be able to do, offer some type of assistance for that first year. But then not just that, we have a tremendous amount of people who don't live in this city who work here. We really want to start bringing those people back. That adds to the visibility within the community, and it makes people feel safer to know that they have an officer that lives on the street. We're not unlike any other city. We're all dealing with the same thing. So again, you have Norfolk officer here, Suffolk officer there, Isle of Wight officer. So we're all kind of doing some of the same things to be able to retain and things of that nature. Enhanced referral bonus. Currently, we do offer a referral bonus, but again, one of the things I want to highlight, this is the referral bonus that we do have currently is available to all city employees. So if you know someone that you can refer, please offer them, let them know that we are hiring. The previous one was also available for citizens as well, to be able to, if you refer somebody as a citizen, you can get up to $500 for referring someone to the police department. These are good incentives. You have a great police department, but we desperately need some folks to come in. And then obviously we have some challenges as it relates to retention. Many of our upper echelon of the police department are at that age where they can retire. Right now, for us, some of that has already started to happen. And of course, again, it's hard if anybody who has retired, when you get to that point and you say, I'm done, it's hard to be able to convince somebody to stay a little bit longer. But, right now we're looking about 450 years of experience that could walk out of our door. Yes, you can replace that body, but you don't replace that experience right off. And so that's a challenge for us. And so those are some of the bonus incentives that we're potentially looking at right now for the retention of our current folks who are eligible to retire. So as I was mentioning earlier, one of the goals for us right now is a 30% reduction in the deficit of officers. And that is going to be through both retention and also the attraction of new officers. The goal is to send 2 classes of 25 to the police academy. And of course, the challenge with that is you may send 25. The reality is you may get 15 back. And of those 15, you hope to get 12 that are going to make it through the process. This is not, just because you get hired don't necessarily mean that you're going to pan out to wear the uniform. But obviously we want to hire folks that are going to be successful, so we're really targeting people that are leaving the military. We're targeting folks that are college, that are looking for maybe that first job. Obviously it's a good opportunity if you know anybody who's affected by the recent alterations in staffing at the federal level and they're looking. Portsmouth is hiring, in particular the police department, and we will welcome them with open arms. We have launched are in the process of launching a wider campaign to look into Pennsylvania, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. The thought behind that was, and again, thank you all for where we are right now. But in addition to, when you think about negative media as it relates to the city itself, how that hinders individuals from wanting to come and join the department. And so a lot of positive things right now as we're changing as a city. These are opportunities for us to improve, but of course folks that live in other areas don't maybe not necessarily know about Portsmouth in that particular manner. So, you know, we're changing our opportunities for recruiting, things of that nature. Mentorship programs, and then expansion of our Explorers program. We even have a cadet program. We're hiring them at 18 right now, holding them at the academy, holding them within the police department until they're 20 and a half, and then sending them to the academy. So we're trying to do a lot of things. I did have a conversation with the schools about potentially starting an ROTC style program, but for police in the school system. Again, our goal is not, if nothing else, is to educate our folks to understand the law, how we interact with the public, and hopefully a few of them will decide to come and join our ranks. I'll be brief on this because we've talked about this quite a bit. Again, technology that we've got over the last 2 years, real-time crime center, lock gunshot detection, license plate readers, and expansion of our CCTV. I had an opportunity to have a conference call with VDOT, Mr. Wright, James Wright, the other day, related to our expansion of CCTV, where we're looking at several of our intersections and upgrading those cameras to serve as dual purpose for us. That will also give us pan, tilt, zoom, but then also potentially looking at some additional traction, forgive me, I call it TPS, but it basically turns your signals for you as you approach lights and sirens. Again, when you talk about just public safety and all, it's important to be able to have those type of things for us as a city.
It's preemption.
Preemption, thank you, sir. All right, so one of the new things that we have coming on board, we started this conversation with the Crime Commission, was the ability to be able to make a front-facing, real-time dashboard that will be open to the public. One of the calls I was on last week, so currently there are only about 35 gun violence dashboards that update on a monthly basis, and only about 13 in the nation that update real time. Portsmouth will be the 14th. This is a mock of what we already have in place. It's going to individuals be able to search data as it relates to we're going to have one that's strictly for violent crime, and then one that's going to be second page that will give you this additional information as well. This is important when it comes to understanding not only where our issues are, health department, when we talk about mental health, and understanding the resources and who needs to be where. Even our violence interrupters, this information is important to them. It really is an opportunity for us as a community to take a holistic look at our crime, and then look for opportunities for maybe a crime prevention by design. When we build something, or when something is improved, is it necessarily right for that particular area? Do we need to put something else there that doesn't add to the distress on the community? So we're anticipating this will go live no later than the 30th of April, if not sooner. All right, real quick, business security partnerships. We've had our QR code initiative that we put forth. A lot of our stores have really taken that. Was at our Coffee with a Cop this past week at Wawa, and they raved about how much the foolishness, for lack of a better word, was going down just because of the presence that was going. It has actually gotten a lot of traction here regionally. We've had other police departments call us about it, other businesses in other cities ask about how they could get it stood up in their business. And this was one of the brainchilds of one of my police lieutenants who attended the Police Leadership Academy in Chicago. And that was his capstone project. Our gun violence initiatives, again, Portsmouth United, again, is the cornerstone of that. And our mental health co-response team. We met on that last week, myself and Ms. Bradstock and her staff, as we work to try to get that implemented by July, I believe it is. And again, this is just looking at the amount of calls for service as it relates to our mental health population. It is a drain on us as a police department, but also looking for other opportunities and resources that be able to help us augment those particular situations. Some conversations with Maryview about potentially building a mental health wing, or at least making a mental health wing over in some vacant property they have there. So a lot of good things as it relates to dealing with our mental health challenges, but again, we want to make sure that this continues to be at the forefront of the conversation. All right, any questions?
Councilman Hugo, sir, you have the floor.
I didn't ask a question, but I got a few.
Perfect, good job.
First, Chief, thanks for the brief, thanks for the update. Appreciate all that you and your team are doing to keep us safe. Really a comment to one of the things that you talked about around community policing. So we go to a lot of Civic League meetings. Your guys are always there with updates. When I hear neighbors complaining, especially social media neighbors complaining, I called for some problem and nobody ever came. Those neighbors are never the ones that are at Civic League meetings making the connection with your folks who do neighborhood policing. So my comment really isn't for you. It's for our neighbors who are watching tonight. Hopefully, you take away the message that your folks are out in the neighborhoods. It's the same people out in the neighborhoods. They give away their cell phone numbers to folks that visit the Civic League meetings. So if there is an issue, they're available if they're on duty. And so my encouragement to our neighbors, get to a Civic League meeting, find out who your neighborhood police officer is, make that connection, get their cell phone number, and stop belly aching on social media. Can you go to the recruitment and retention slide, please?
Yes, sir. While I navigate that, I will give a brief. Last month, I started a online meeting specifically for Civic League presidents, vice presidents. It'll be the fourth Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock. And I've already sent the invite. We have already had one. We'll have another one, I believe, this Thursday. So again, encourage people. We're trying to interact as much as possible.
Okay, we talked about this at the retreat and wasn't apparently ready for prime time yet. So hopefully the fact that you put it up there on the screen means that you and the chief have agreed this is where we're going in the FY26 budget.
Almost all of that. We have not worked out the proposed employee VRS years of service retention bonus yet, but the rest of that is.
Okay, well, so here's what I'm asking. We told you as a council that policing and crime and law enforcement and public safety is the priority. If we had $1 left, we were going to put it on there. So I don't want to wait until July to do this.
Okay.
Now, I'm encouraging my colleagues, let's in consensus send the message to the city manager. If we got $1 left over in FY25, let's start spending it right now. We got police officers who are in the retirement category who are already out
Looking for another job.
looking for another job.
Yes.
And we need to engage him not in the 1st of July when we have an approved budget. We need him to engage him now, you to engage him now. And so if we got a dollar left over in FY '25, I'm hoping that the rest of you will agree. Let's ask the city manager to get on with implementing this in collaboration with the chief, because we're going to lose 450 years of experience if we don't get off our keisters and get this moving.
I thought we made that clear at the retreat.
Well, so we made it clear as a priority, but we
Yeah,
didn't
specifics.
have numbers. And
Yes.
importantly, we
Yeah, I've seen 'em,
communicated that it was an FY '26
Exactly.
budget priority. What I'm saying is, I don't want to wait to '26. If we got money in the general fund balance, and I'm sure we do, and this is peanuts money compared to what it's going to cost us to replace the 450 years of experience that's getting ready to walk out the door. So the retention bonus, we're trying to get 2 25-person classes together. We don't have, how many do we have in the first class at this point? Not 25.
Maybe 8.
Yeah, so everything on the left-hand side is all about getting 25 people in this next class. Everything on the right-hand side is about not losing 450 years of experience. I'm saying, come on, folks, let's tell the city manager, go spend the money now, because we're getting ready to lose the opportunity to spend any money saving 450 years of experience and getting the chief the people that he needs in his recruiting or in his academy classes upcoming. So
If I could make a statement to that point, let's get through the questions, and then because we may have some other questions, and then we can address that request. Is that fair, sir?
yes, sir. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. I, too, appreciate this presentation. It's a great follow-up, also, City Manager, to add it to our agenda, because at our retreat, we did say we want those constant kind of updates on public safety, not just for us, but for the public as well, because it is our priority. So I appreciate this presentation with the information you shared today. Before my actual question, which is pertaining to the new crime dashboard, the question you just asked, Councilman Hugel, I don't know how this works in the police department, but normally, well, sometimes when you have, those years of experience possibly exiting the door, have you engaged those individuals already to see what their plan is at all, before we offer?
We stay in constant
Okay.
contact. So, I mean, I guess there's 2 ways to look at this.
Like a state survey or something?
Yeah, so
what are your plans?
there's 2 ways to look at it, and when I have conversations, there's always, for some it's the threat of if something doesn't happen, I'm leaving. That's my personality. That's hard for me. I'm never going to change. That's hard for me. All right, because as much as I want some of them to stay, the end result of that is we as a police department still have to function. And so, we want to find ways to incentivize them to stay, but it can't be under threat of, if you don't do, I'm going to do. So, that's just been my take on it. But I often engage them to see if they have plans. And again, some of them, I have, one that one of my fraud has taken a position at the Port Authority. Here's the other part of this is, and this is one of the things that we need to actively legislate for in the state of Virginia, is that because so many localities have now joined VRS, people when they get to a retirement at 50 years old with still a lot of gas in the tank, they no longer can be a police officer in the state of Virginia unless they do part-time, because they have to, they can't collect 2 retirements. And it's come up to for legislation agenda at least twice in either data committee or something of that nature. But I don't think people are really looking at, when I came on the department, there were 400 people waiting for a job for 2 slots when we took the job at the Armory. We just did a recruitment, all-day recruitment event on Saturday, and we had 7 people. So again, the challenges are different today.
Okay. All right, that's a good point for us to kind of consider the bigger, some of the other issues causing some of that, years of service leaving out and not being able to stay. You said a term, and I didn't catch it when you were talking about the new crime dashboard, and I think it relates to what you had on your other slide, predictive policing, kind of tying all that data together. One thing, I think you called it new crime. I wish I wrote it down, but I didn't. But it piqued an interest for me because when we're talking about just some of the ways that we apply our resources, our limited resources now, but also engaging those other community organizations, and also like community partnerships that we have with our other departments. I'm going to say behavioral health care, social services, that all play into even our schools, education. Is some of this data available to be shared with those other organizations, because they have programming that directly has a tie to reducing crime, and it seems like you are building that data and that dashboard to tie into those, like pinpointing those hot spots, because you even said you think it's a neighborhood, but it might just be this block or that block, and really kind of pinpointing our resources. Is that something that you already engage in, or our department already engages in, or is that a future outlook that can also be developed with this dashboard that's coming?
Yeah, so again, this is going to be a public front facing, so everybody,
Okay.
whether it just lives on the police department website, or Mr. Gaigola takes it and puts it on the city website. Again, we want this information to be readily available to everyone. We've also started some conversation at that last meeting with potentially building a mental health dashboard as well, because again, we do spend a tremendous amount of time and resources on that, and what you're going to see is those things kind of start to overlap, and we're trying to ensure that those ones that need the help, that we don't necessarily just brush over. What happens with how many people receive calls from 988, and what was the outcome of that? What was the disposition of someone that might have received some services as it relates to one of these calls? And making sure that they're categorized correctly the first time. Someone dancing in the street can be categorized as a suspicious situation when it really is a mental health crisis.
And that's exactly where I was kind of going with it. I would love to see, in the past I've seen, organizations, they build a dashboard, and maybe another part of that organization, they also have a dashboard of data, but the data, they actually connect to each other, but they never make the connecting dots. And so I think that would be beneficial as you continue to build your dashboard out, that you bring in those other departments, those other stakeholders, to make sure you're talking your language for crime, but it feeds into each other somehow. So thank you.
I agree. Yes, ma'am.
I know Vice Mayor after you, Vice Mayor.
Go ahead.
Chief, great presentation. The mobile units, how are those deployed?
Mobile?
What's the criteria? The camera.
Oh, okay,
units.
okay. So they're being deployed based on one incident, how many incidents we're having, whether it's a hot spot for us. Some of it is we've had it everything from as it relates to if we've had a shooting, it may be we may deploy it out there. Like for instance, the one that's at London Plaza, it was related to a lot of the activity that we were having there with the business. But also it was able to capture the shooting that took place a couple of days ago. So again, just because of that corridor, so we're looking at making sure that the mobile cameras that we have And again, if it dies down, we'll move it to somewhere else. But we don't want to move it too soon, have to bring it right back.
Can businesses request them?
So there are some businesses that purchase their or rent their own. Some of them have been very gracious with allowing us camera feeds to that, in which we are actually solicited and encouraged, because again, it gives us access to, if there is a business that is experienced something, we'll go out and evaluate it, and if we need to put one there, but we want to make sure we're not, we got to be fair in that allocation of stuff, because if I do it for one business, then I need to be able to do it for another, just on a time frame. But if that business is experiencing a tremendous amount of theft or violence or something, absolutely we're going to put it there, simply because one is advantageous for us, but more so for the people who patronize it and the citizens around it.
Well, the reason why I ask, I know one's been at Lowe's for quite some time.
They own that one.
And people like that,
Yeah.
and they feel safe,
Yes,
going to any business that one of the portable cameras is located.
Yeah, Lowe's, Walmart, the one that's on George Washington Highway, they're all privately owned. The apartment complex that's on George Washington is Marsh Landing. They have 2 or 3 out there that they've given us access to. So again, good partnerships with the community, just understanding that, resources wise, but allowing us to have access, or even just knowing who to call if something happens and not having to wait those extra hours trying to figure out. Those have all been very beneficial to us.
Also on the photo red locations, have we, I don't know that we've had any data on the success, the tickets have been written.
I can get that back to you.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for us. I think it's been a while now since they were implemented, so.
Yes, sir. The school zones as well.
School zones, even the school bus cameras as well.
Is that it, sir?
Yes.
Councilman Dodson?
Thank you, sir. First of all, I want to log in as a supporter of what Mr. Hugel is saying for immediate engagement. Love to see it.
Got 2.
Got 2. Secondly, the legislative agenda. Can we add that on for our legislative agenda for the next session?
That is which one?
The retirement?
retirement.
Yes. Can we make sure that's on?
We can absolutely discuss that.
Okay. Thirdly, can I get a map of your officers that come to Civic League meetings? I think it's divided into 3 zones, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Can I get a map with those officers' names labeled on it so I can distribute it to some of these people that Mr. Hugel is talking about and shut down some of this social media crap?
Yeah, a lot of that information is actually posted on our site. So we'll have some discussion about
Okay.
that.
And then, thirdly, I know we talked about response time. Are we up for getting a response time updates regularly to the council? Because I think response time of the police is what people's perception of enforcement is. I think it's the greatest measure that we have when we're talking about measuring things. It's not whether they perceive whether police is there for them, and the response time to their call, whether it's just a simple robbery or a ding in their car or a murder, is the measure that we need to be talking about.
You're talking about 911? Is that what you're talking about?
Response time to any all reports filed.
Once somebody make the call, when does somebody show up?
Yeah, and we classify those crimes in terms of categories. The chief has a whole big section of it, and it'd be nice to know the response time for each of those categories.
Yes, sir. They break down into priorities. Priority 1 calls, priority 1 through 5, and we can get that information to you.
Yeah, can we get? I'd love to see if there's a.
All that kind of information is available to the public. We can make that available.
Councilwoman Bragg?
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, thank you. I want to applaud your department's creativity, because we did discuss this at length in the retreat, but I think it's worth saying again tonight, and for us to carry out into the community with us when we go to Civic League meetings and other community events, that these initiatives like the new technology, the crime numbers being down, the violence interrupting, the crime dashboard, and the mental health initiatives are all something that we are clearly doing well, we're doing creatively, and I think a really important role of council is to get those messages out. You guys do a wonderful job with your social media and being out in public, but we can certainly do that from our point of view too, our position too. So it's great to see the creative measures that you're taking.
Thank you.
And Chief, a couple of things. One of the things that I wanted to ask, are you all still experiencing challenges with your officers when they take someone to the hospital on a behavioral health issue and they have to sit with them? Because we discussed that at the regional level, and what it is because there's a chain of custody, so when we bring someone into the hospital with a mental health issue, it takes our officers off of the street. I think to some point to be able to respond. We talked about this at the regional level, and what we talked about at the regional level, perhaps we could get some of our retired officers that don't want to do policing full time to come in and take that role. It's a legislative issue. We did bring it up at the regional level. We wanted to approach it, but I think the time is now. All of us struggle with that regionally, and because I serve as chair of the PDC, I'm willing to bring that back up. I'll get some data from you, but we need to move that forward for the next legislative session. We'll talk about that. The other thing, can you share with us, I hear my colleagues, and we talked about this at the retreat. I'm all on board with making sure that we keep as many of our seasoned folks as we can. But I want to hear from you, if you could. Can you articulate what's your sense? And I know you kind of said it, but I mean, what's your sense? Is there value? I'm not just going to assume. Is there value in doing that? And if it is, certainly I think is worth supporting from where we stand. So, if you could share that, please.
Yeah. So, obviously, at some point in time, I think everybody has their expiration date. What that expiration date isn't necessarily on me to figure out. One of the things I can tell you is that everybody here is being held accountable for productivity and being here. You're not just here, you're here to contribute to the organization and for the betterment of the city. And so one of the things that folks will tell you, I advocate for this department all the time about, just everything. But at the same time, there's an exchange for that.
Sure.
And that exchange is, I need things done within the community. I need that citizen callback. I need those things done, and not yesterday. I need it done today. And so those things are frequently discussed. I just had that conversation today with my entire investigations unit about continuing to raise our standard. Remember, my goal as the chief of this organization is to make us the best in the state. So there has to be some measures of what that looks like.
Sure.
So for anyone to leave right now, yes, it hurts. It hurts us. But I also say there's a few that need to go home too, right?
We got you.
Some of them will make that decision for themselves. But I cannot stand to lose them all, 100%.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. And so I know that my colleagues posed a question. Councilman Tillage.
So my question in regards to the bonuses would be, number one, can we get a figure of how much all that would cost? Not just individual checks.
First,
That's number one. Well, then number two, what is the, I guess, the contingency of receiving it? Do we just give it to them, or is it one of those things where you get your retention bonus, but you're basically agreeing to serve another year?
Correct.
I would like to know that.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion before you answer? I think we can have a consensus on a resolution to support this notion to be brought up and put on the agenda for the next meeting. You would decide today, like any other work session, that's something you want to see. That gives us time to work through these little intricacies. That's sort of what was making my spidey senses go off when you mentioned it. But I do think it's important for you all to adopt it or I guess not adopted, that's not what you're doing, but to have a consensus on it today so that we can bring it up for adoption at the next council meeting.
I think that's it. Vice Mayor, did you have a question?
My question was similar to Councilman Tillage. What do we get in return? A year? But when is the bonus paid? After serving the year, I would assume?
We would
Or
have
is
to
that,
work- yeah,
or is
work
that some of the
out.
details?
Yeah, that's the details we
Yeah.
can work out. I just think we can work out those details.
Yeah.
So we'll take that up then as a matter, Madam Attorney, we need a consensus at least to move forward in preparation, right? In preparation for having the discussion and bringing back a resolution that meets the expectations of what sets forth. Okay? So can we get a show of hands who would agree to have that consensus to move forward?
Could I make one more comment?
Absolutely.
So the urgency here is to give you the tools that you need. If there are other tools that weren't on that slide and you need them, you guys put your heads together and come tell us, because we don't want to tie your hands. We want to do whatever you need us to do to get out of your way so that you can be successful in recruiting and retaining your team.
We've been working very well with identifying those things. There are some things that have a process, procurement, things of that nature. But we've been very targeted on, we don't want to get it just because we can. We want to get it and it be implemented and pay some dividends for it.
Well, Chief, thank you. And on behalf of the council and certainly Manager Carter, we appreciate the efforts of you and your team. Continue to stay safe out there, and we'll look forward to the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, sir. In the interest of time, we have a closed session still.
We do?
Yeah, so I may have to cut you. I'm sorry, push you to the next one. If we don't, we're gonna be totally late.
Why is everybody looking at me?
So,
Give me a mean look.
Mr. Carter, if I may, Mr. Carter, if I understand you correctly, we have one more presentation.
one more presentation.
And that's economic development. We will move that to the next work session.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that okay with you, sir?
What I'm asking
Okay,
to be done.
very good. So we
In the
will
interest of
move,
time in this closed session that we still have to do, and to try to get the next meeting started on time, I just don't know that we could do this.
thank you, sir. Point well taken. If we could, then we'll move along with the scheduled agenda. And so our next item is we do have a need for a closed session. And Vice Mayor Moody, would you please read the closed session motion?
I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A8 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel employed by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, specifically regarding the Southeastern Public Service Authority.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Hugo?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage?
Yes.
Mayor Glover?
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in closed session.
Council member certify that to best of his or her knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Second.
Second, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Dodson?
Yes.
Mr. Hugo?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Tillage?
Yes.
Mayor Glover?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we will reconvene at 7:10. Is that okay with everyone? 7:10.
Well, there was a couple things left.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize, sir.
I'm sorry, sir.
No, that's
Just
my fault.
to mention that we will have a resolution this evening for the mission and vision statement.
Yes.
As a formal resolution by the council to adopt the vision and mission statement. That statement was developed during the city council retreat and serve to define the council's governance priorities and long-term aspirations for the city. By adopting these statements through this resolution, the city council affirms its commitment to guiding its official actions and decisions in alignment with these stated vision and the stated vision and mission. So that will appear. And what section would that be? That will be in the.
That will be an item submitted by
council. And if you would, when we get to that part, read that again.
Okay.
I'll call on you, sir.
Then I read it again.
Take the heat off of me.
All right.
You're done?
I do have a recap of the agenda items. We have, I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, we have no public in here to hear what you're saying.
It's being recorded, I guess. Okay, so we'll throw it out there anyway. Okay. We have 5 items to talk about this evening under the CMR section. The first one is a Shelter Plus Care grant. This is a CMR for an ordinance to accept $780,395 in Shelter Plus Care funds from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. These funds will be used to provide housing and supportive services for the chronically homeless individuals and families in Portsmouth. The Virginia Personal Property Tax Relief Act will be adopted also through an ordinance this evening. That rate has been set at 50% again for 2025. This is required under the Virginia Personal Property State Relief Act, which mandates that localities annually establish a relief percentage to fully utilize the state's allocated resource of these funds. We've set, or the commissioner has set that at 50% again this year.
Okay.
A Navy access agreement is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an access agreement with the United States Navy to construct a new sewer line serving the Norfolk Navy Naval Shipyard. The sewer line will be installed beneath portions of Green Street and Portsmouth Boulevard. All materials and construction methods will be subject to city approval. However, the Navy will bear full responsibility for construction and maintenance costs. The Verizon cable franchise renewal is also an ordinance that is up for your consideration. This ordinance will reestablish the cable franchise for Verizon in the city of Portsmouth. Current existing agreement is set to expire April 22nd, 2025. And finally, the EMS workers' compensation presumption for heart and lungs resolution. I think this is just some administrative work to kind of finish up something that was actually passed by the Virginia State Legislature in 2021, allowing localities to opt in via resolution. I think it was our desire to opt in at some point previous to this, but the resolution was never, completed. So tonight will be the administrative portion of that to complete that resolution. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. We'll see everybody at 7:15.